This is Community Forum, a service of CAN TV. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Chicago Eco House aims to renew neighborhoods and help people renew their lives. Our guests, Hannah Bonham and Keelan Blackwell, are here to discuss this work of hope, compassion, and restoration. Welcome.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. Appreciate it.
I'm glad to have you here. As I just met you a few days ago, Keelan, and you were able to work it out and come in. Thanks so much. And thanks for doing this great, exciting work. We're going to start off by talking about each of you individually and what you do at Chicago Eco House. Hannah, please.
Okay. So I'm involved in community relations. So basically, we're trying to find ways to create relationships between, through our organization, between people in Englewood and elsewhere in the city. Englewood, as we all know, it's in the news a lot. Everybody, hears what goes on there.
The bad news, right?
Mostly the bad, yeah. And I think there's a lot of concerned people in the city, but they don't know kind of where to go with their concern or what to do. And so I see my role as kind of finding ways to connect people to just sort of real lives, in Englewood, but also to be able to build relationships that can then benefit our organization, what we're trying to do.
Okay, great. And Keelan, you're one of the founders.
Yep. Yes, I'm the co-founder and president of Chicago Eco House. We've been around for about a year now. My background is actually in community organizing and renewable energy. So, early on in my career, I was in the Peace Corps for a couple years in Thailand. I also worked as a community organizer around affordable housing.
In Thailand?
No, actually in suburban Milwaukee.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Thailand is doing more rural development, helping farmers with economic capacity building. So, I've been around a little bit.
Wow.
And then I used to work for a biofuels company out of Milwaukee for the last few years. And now I have my own personal business in renewable energy. So when we started the Chicago Eco House, my roommate and I, who's the co-founder.
And you guys met through Craigslist, right?
Yep, that's correct, Ron. Yeah, we actually met on Craigslist. A lot of people think that Craigslist is a scary, spooky place, but sometimes good things can happen. So I did know my roommate from Adam prior to October of 2013. And I was looking for a place. At the time, I was living in Melrose Park. And I was looking for, somewhere I can come to the city, try to get my feet wet. And he was there, came into his apartment. We sort of had instant chemistry. So nowadays we're really good friends. But at that time, I was already doing a lot of community work in Englewood at the high school, Team Englewood High School down there on 63rd and Stewart. And he just came alongside me, and we both found that we had a similar passion of trying to turn around the inner city and help Chicago.
So you guys clicked, you have this chemistry, you're good friends.
Right.
Usually that just results in a good party time. Like, let's hang out and go to the bars and meet people. I don't know, that's usually what it translates to.
Well,
what is it, what was that moment or what were those conversations like where both of you said, we've got to do something and make it green?
Well, we got a lot of that partying out of our system many years ago. I'm in my 30s now. Larry's in his 30s.
30s is the new 20s, though.
Stretch it out.
But Larry's also a father of two kids. So I think from Larry's point of view, having children.
Oh, he settled you down then.
Yeah, exactly. Because Larry's oldest son is 13, his daughter's 7. For me, I've just always been more passionate about community development, just because my dad was a community organizer growing up in Wisconsin. So, our initial connection was actually around sports. So, he really liked watching sports, so did I. But then as we just spent more time together, like what roommates normally do, we just started talking about some of the deeper issues. And one of the things that both resonated with us was a lot of the violence and the poverty going on in the inner city.
Wow. And we were talking about it right before the show. How is that you connected with them, Hannah? It's kind of a roundabout story in some ways, right?
So I was talking to a friend about some things that I was wanting to do in the inner city. So I moved to Chicago almost 10 years ago now. My best friend and I had a list of cities. We picked one. It was Chicago. We were going to live here for a year for fun. We lived in the Gold Coast. And, you know, it ended up that I stayed, you know, longer than the year. And the longer that I stayed, the more what drew me wasn't all the glitz and the glamour, but was really some of the history of Chicago. And I had been here when I was 15 on the south side, actually, funny enough, right beside Englewood, blocks away.
Wow.
And it really impacted me. We were with a lot of kids who were living at that time in the Robert Taylor homes. And I think that it really impacted me, so that, you know, years later when I lived here, you know, I started doing a lot of research and reading about, you know, the different neighborhoods in Chicago and why is it so segregated, and why is, you know, the poverty and the violence, you know, the way that it is. And so 3 years ago I decided to move to the west side to try to understand it from a little more of a personal place. And I had some ideas about
Not many people do that.
Yeah, it, you know, I felt like, you know, a lot of people said, you know, aren't you scared? Isn't this, you know, how can you do this? And I felt in turn that I was able to see the real thing, whereas people have to rely on kind of just what the media shows. And I felt that I was very privileged to be able to see, you know, kind of the day-to-day also, and really fall in love with the people in my neighborhood and on my block. And it impacted me in a way that I really wanted to do something that made a difference.
So then, how did you finally connect and start working together?
So I was telling a friend we were road tripping from a wedding, you know, 11 hours in the car. So you just talk about anything because you have like all this time. So I was telling him about some of the things I was trying to do in East Garfield, and he said, you know, you really should get connected to the Chicago Eco House because they're trying to do some similar things, and they really want to make an impact in the inner city. And what really drew me was one, you know, focus around abandoned housing, because that's what I was trying to do. But two, it was something that was going to create jobs, which I felt like was a huge need, and I wasn't sure like what the answer to that. And three, it was something that could be replicated. And so instead of putting all of my energy into one house like I was trying to do, I thought, you know, what would it look like to actually do something that could be replicated all over the city of Chicago and then in other cities around the U.S. that are struggling with similar issues.
Right, and you mentioned one of the keywords and something that you obviously is in your logo and your website: abandoned houses. Why not just tear them down? Why restore them? Why build them up? Why look to put homeless folks in there?
That's a great question, Juan Carlos. I'm actually glad you asked that. This is one of my biggest passions. So first of all, in the city of Chicago, there's estimates of that the city has about anywhere from 30 to 50,000 abandoned homes.
That
and
many?
Lots. Yes. You know, it's hard to get an accurate count, but you know, I've seen estimates as high as 50,000. You know, we include the lots as well.
Okay.
And most of those are concentrated in the west side and the south side of Chicago, right? So you know, if you look at a place like Detroit, because I've read in the news that in one neighborhood of Detroit, they did adopt that solution. They just started tearing down all these homes, and you know, essentially you just had, you know, for blocks and blocks and blocks, just, you know, leveled properties and vacant lots, and yeah, the crime went away, but that's because the people went away, right? You know,
they're
so
just abandoned neighborhoods.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have a gutted neighborhood, you know, in the most literal sense. So you know, for us, we care about the people, right? And one of the things that bother us is that a lot of times when, you know, in the conversation about gentrification, about economic and community development, it seems to be more about, you know, physical restoration in terms of the buildings that attract a new demographic that isn't indigenous to that community.
Usually affluent and white.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, to be blunt about it.
Right.
You know, so for us, you know, we want to try to, you know, preserve the people who are there, at least give them an opportunity to choose, right? Because, you know, one of the things that we're talking about in the green room is how there's this trend that a lot of poor and minority neighborhoods and people are getting pushed to the edges of the city, right?
Right.
And it's just making it even more difficult, creating more obstacles to go to school, go to work, as, you know, a lot of the jobs are going into the, you know, downtown areas. So, you know, I remember like even, you know, early on when I was working in Inglewood, I came across a guy who it took him 2 hours just to get to work, you know, one way.
2 hours?
Right. That he had to catch a bus, to another bus to get to the train, then another bus, then finally get to work, and then do it all back. So now imagine doing that this time of year when it's cold. You're talking about sub-zero temperatures, right?
You're talking about a 3-hour commute then, not necessarily a 2-hour commute.
Right. So you're spending almost half your day,
right,
on the bus and on the train. And I was like, well, how much are you getting paid? He's like, oh, well, I'm working as a server, making like $9 an hour.
Wow.
Right. So that gives you an idea of just how challenging it is for people in these neighborhoods to be able to take care of themselves economically. So when we start this eco house, the reason why we didn't want to just wipe out all the houses is because we didn't just want to add another barrier to make life more difficult for people.
Right.
And our whole goal is to try to create a inner city renaissance. Right. We want to try to revitalize it first by creating an economic engine that can produce jobs, and we think the most viable way to do that is through the emerging green industry boom that, I've seen projections as high as 500 million jobs could be created globally by mid-century. Obama, in 2009, he mentioned that his goal was to create 5 million green-collar jobs by the end of his term. And he's already created, the U.S. has already created 2.1 million green-collar jobs, right? So we just wanted to try to direct a lot of that into the inner city, because right now a lot of the green energy movement, a lot of the job development has been more in the suburbs. It's been in more white affluent neighborhoods, and we're just asking, well, why can't minority neighborhoods, inner city neighborhoods, the people who need it the most, partake in that economic growth?
Right, definitely. So how exactly is this translating to on the ground work, like when you're actually getting your hands dirty and talking and listening and talking to people and connecting organizations? How is that working? What's that look like in the day-to-day work of Chicago Eco House?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we kind of found that a lot of people, your normal people in the neighborhoods, they don't really think about anything green, right? Like just because they haven't been invited to the conversation yet. So, we found that they're actually pretty excited. So there's several organizations that we're working with right now. Rage with, Aisha Butler, Pastor Dwayne Grant at Greater Inglewood, United Methodist Church, Teamwork Inglewood, and other local organizations who really embraced the Chicago Eco House and what we're trying to bring. And the thing that they're most excited about is our green collar jobs component, where right now we're in conversations with different companies and groups to create green collar job training programs specifically for homeless and at-risk young people in the Inglewood neighborhood. Because there's a lot of social development work, right, that goes on in the inner city, around education, around families, and it's all very important work. We definitely support and advocate for that. But we really believe that until people have a means to take care of themselves, right, be able to put a roof over your head, be able to put food on the table, right, that a lot of that work is going to be, it's only going to be able to go so far, right? Because one of the things that when you look at the history of these neighborhoods, it hasn't always been like that. You look at a place like Inglewood in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't this ghetto that it is today. One of the reasons that was the case is because you had more blue collar manufacturing jobs. Right.
People are making a good living.
Exactly. You're making it's easier to get a job where you're able to make $20, $30 an hour. My grandfather, who lives in Milwaukee, he worked at Briggs and Stratton, which is an engine manufacturing company, for 30 years. Making $30 an hour. He retired with a great pension, and because of that job, he was able to take care of my mom, which put her in a position to be able to take care of me. Right. So when you take away that basic ability for people to take care of themselves, it doesn't just affect that one person, it's affecting the generations, down to your grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Right.
I think there's also this idea that people don't want to work, or people just want to live
the stereotypes.
People that just want to deal drugs. And it's really interesting because I remember hearing that from somebody and thinking, I wonder if they've ever actually had a conversation, with somebody, on welfare, or somebody who, was a drug dealer. And because on my block, I had several of those. And there was one kid especially, he had dropped out when he was a freshman in high school, and now he was 19, so he can't go back into school, and he's starting to realize what a life, dealing drugs, was like. So he came up to me and he said, can you hook me up with a job, any job? And I said, well, I'm not sure. He said, I'll do anything. He said, I used to work at Burger King. I was a really hard worker. And, and I thought, I don't know anyone who is begging me for a job at a fast food restaurant in order to get off the streets. And so I came up to him weeks later, and there was an opportunity in an urban farm, and I thought, am I gonna have to sell this as like, is it cool enough? Like, is he gonna think it's kind of weird? And I just literally, I hadn't even explained it. I just said, there's a possible job, you know, with an urban farm, and he said, I'll do it, just let me know, I'll do it. So, you know, he was just saying, I've got to get off these streets, I've got to get off, you know, doing this. So it's really important, I think, for people to realize that, you know, a lot of times when people aren't given a lot of choices, they have to sort of grasp at what is in front of them. And we really believe that, you know, giving the choice to stay in the neighborhood, giving the choice to work a job, really could, you know, be something that could just change, you know, a lot more than those few people could actually change the whole neighborhood.
You know, and if you don't mind, if I could just bounce
go
off
ahead,
what
go
you
ahead.
said, you know, because one of the things I really believe is that, you know, someone's perception of you is the reality of you, right? So when you have this perception that's constantly being portrayed in the media that the inner city is just filled with these thugs who are lazy, they're, you know, just
All they do is
good.
want to do is drug deal.
Right. You know, so then the message that's being conveyed to the business community is, I don't want to invest there.
Right.
So you have a lot of people who Hannah's talking about that never talked to anyone who's lived in the inner city. They've never driven. I mean, you'll be amazed how many people who I've met here in Chicago have never been south of the Roosevelt stop at the Red Line. You know.
Yeah, we've made that observation with some friends of mine. You know, they're
Yeah.
like, well, how many people venture to the south side?
Right.
Yeah.
And so through Chicago Eco House, wow, this could be an hour-long conversation, and we're getting close to the end. But tell me what you've done in this year and what you're planning in the year to come, please.
Okay, well, so like in 2014, in our inaugural year, our main program has been the science club that we worked at Team Inglewood High School, right? So once a week we would take kids in the high school and expose them to different science concepts. We worked in a little garden at Team Inglewood High School where we had kids like, you know, plant some basic like basil and just some, you know, like a little small community garden or a school garden. This year we kind of want to take it to the next level. So we're working with Greater Inglewood United Methodist Church, who owns a block and a half of vacant lot space.
Okay.
And we're looking to develop that into a community garden. As a result, we're really looking to do our eco club right now at the church. And then also we want to build out eco houses and some of the vacant housing that are around Pastor Grant's church down there at Greater Inglewood UMC. He's actually in a unique situation. I actually learned this past weekend that part of Inglewood, which is by the 63rd and Halstead stop, local people call that Show No Love City, right? It's actually one of the flash points. I guess it's like on a gang line. So like right there on Green Street, there's a lot of shootings that goes on there, a lot of violence. As a matter of fact, Hannah and I, you know, over the summer when we were going down the neighborhood just canvassing, we almost got caught in the middle of a drive-by shooting. You know, if it was just a few minutes earlier, you know, we could have been, you know, an innocent casualty when we'd be having this conversation right now. But, you know, so this is an area where we really feel like it needs the development.
It needs that hope.
Yeah, it needs that hope. And we want to try to build a demonstration project to show the neighborhood how green energy and renewable energy can benefit the neighborhood. And it's actually interesting too because right across the street is where they're building the Whole Foods project on 63rd and Halstead. So it's already an area where there's some energy and the city's already looking at in terms of redeveloping. So we're just trying to come alongside that.
Wow. Well, we are out of time, but I wish we could continue talking, and we certainly will at some point in the future. And yeah, just keep us informed about what you're doing. Thanks so much for coming out today.
Thanks for the
All right,
time.
thanks, Juan Carlos. Really appreciate it.
And to you, our audience, thank you for joining us. Community Forum is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Community Forum for local issues and concerns every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.